So there's boundarylessness. So we talk about the emotional boundaries of boundarylessness versus walled off. And we tried to help people see where they fall in those areas. Do they tend to go in, lean in towards boundarylessness or walled off when they are most activated?
And then they marry each other. Yes, one of each marries each other. So one is walled off and one is boundaryless, and they're trying to communicate. Wow. I've never heard that put that way before. I don't want my husband to listen to this podcast now, Caron. This is a terrible idea. I'm going to have to confront that later.
Welcome to That's Me, the podcast where late diagnosed, high masking autistic adults tell their stories unfiltered. I'm Corey Andreas, therapist, writer, and late diagnosed autistic adult. Every episode, you'll hear from autistic people and the professionals learning alongside us. Real conversations about being misdiagnosed, misunderstood, and burned out. We're sharing our experiences with you and hoping that somewhere along the way, this helps you build a life that fits and actually start loving yourself just the way you are. This isn't what the medical world is saying. This isn't what you'll see on TV. This is real talk from real people. Real stories that might just make you say, hey, that's me. We're so glad that you're here.
Welcome back to the That's Me podcast. We have a fabulous guest today. Thank you so much for being here. We have Caron Starobin here. We are excited. How are you today?
I'm great, Corey, and I'm so excited that you asked me to be on this podcast with you. Thank you.
I can't tell you how excited I am because you have been around in the world of neurodivergence before I was, and I have looked up to you forever. So we have been really lucky to be able to have some good conversations. And I was like, we need to do this here. We are talking about awesome stuff. So let's tell people a little bit about the work that you do and your group practice and kind of what you're into.
I'm a clinical social worker. I've been working as a therapist for about close to 25 years. And I do have a group practice right now. I have 8 amazing clinicians and 2 outstanding admin staff that I couldn't live without. And we're all neurodiversity minded, neurodiversity affirming clinicians, but we don't all do the same thing. I focus a lot on more couples and family, but I have other clinicians who do parent-child work, individual teen and young adult work, family therapy. I have a couple of therapists who are trauma specialists and also neurodiversity affirming, and they do some really great work. So,
what a squad.
Yeah.
You have something for everybody. That's amazing.
I will also say that the way I got into, because I don't identify as, autistic or high masking autistic, but the way I got into this work was that when I was a very, very, very young and new social worker. Mm-hmm. I worked for a nonprofit social service agency, and they were like, this client has Asperger's syndrome. That's what what the diagnosis was called at the time. And we don't know what to do, so we're going to give this client to you.
Give it to you. This case is yours. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always like to say, I just call him Steven. He kind of opened up his world and let me in. And I walked in, and that's kind of how I got started. And I always like to talk about that. Yeah.
I love that. That's such an important piece of, I feel like every therapist's story is just like, how the heck did you end up here? Because most of us end up in these worlds that we didn't set out to be in. It's like, how did this happen? So what did you like from the start? What did you like about working with that client?
It was interesting because he was very endearing with other adults. So, as it was with his own peers that he had a lot of trouble with in terms of his social experience was challenging and that bothered him. But with me and with other adults, but particularly with me, he was just a delight. I just loved getting to know him. He was incredibly intellectually engaged and curious and inquisitive. And he had these quirks about him that I just thought were kind of cool. Yeah. So, and I also was in the performing arts world for a long time. I was a professional dancer. Now that I look back, I think there was a fair amount of neurodivergent folks that I was working with constantly.
I'm sure.
So what people don't always know about high masking autistic folks and other neurodivergent folks, ADHD and et cetera, often there's a lot of creativity there.
So much. You're so right. That's also similarly, I was drawn to the same thing. And I found that there was so much humor in the world. Like I was working with teenagers at the time, but I felt like when I was working with and at that time too, it was for me, it was for Asperger's kids, but we were laughing all the time. Like we were laughing.
Yeah.
They had me in stitches. They were such characters, so creative, so intelligent. And I just was like, this doesn't even feel like work. Like I just love these kids.
Yes, that's a very similar experience I had.
Yeah.
I started at the time, I know we don't really do this as much in this formal way anymore. We do it a little bit differently. But at the time, I did all these social skills groups. That was sort of the thing. And I did these groups for boys with Asperger's. And I loved these groups. They were fantastic. And they challenged me in so many ways. So
that's incredible. My very first kiddo that I worked with, the school came to me. I was like, I don't know, 20 nothing and just out of school. And the school was like, I was working in a little tiny school for kids with learning disabilities. And there had been a kid that was sleeping for months, like just sleeping all day, would come in, go to sleep, and then get up when it was time to get on the bus and go home. And they let him sleep. They just let him sleep. So they were like, all right, Miss Chase, I was Miss Chase at the time. They were like, get in there and you got to get this kid to work. And I'm like, well, what's the story? And they're like, we don't know. I'm like, no one has figured out what's going on here. So for the first 2 months of us working together, he wouldn't speak to me. The only thing he would say is yes, no, or maybe. And so I played Uno with this kid for 2 months, almost every day. And it would be like, yes, no, how was your weekend? Nope. Do you want to go back to class? Yes. Okay. Are you going to take the bus today? Maybe. And we would go through this every day. And then finally one day we moved to Mancala. Then we were playing that and he just crushed me every time. It was like, hey, this kid just destroyed me in every game we played. And one time I beat him at Mancala. And he was like, nice one, Miss Chase. I was like, oh my gosh, we did it. I cracked the code. And within a couple months, he was back on track. He was on their highest behavior level. He was doing what he needed to do. But it was just so funny. I just don't think anybody knew what to do with him. And I was like, well let's try something.
I think that's what it was for me with Steve, as I call him, is that I loved the idea of no one else knew what to do,
yes.
I guess, and so I was like, well, I'm going to figure this puzzle out, kind of.
Oh, gosh, yes.
It turned out to be a complicated and really interesting puzzle. And it also allowed me that was when I was, again, I'm a family systems trained social worker. I've always been much more interested in helping more than one person at a time. And I remember learning, the family system around this person needs a lot of attention as well. And that's when I started. It was experimental. I did study with Ami Klin and Stanley Greenspan and, Rebecca Landa. I did study with these folks to learn about autism, Asperger's, and whatnot. Yeah. But the therapy part, there was no one training anyone. No. So it was all like, I'll just give this a shot. And then found that some of these systems orientations actually were effective because the people around some of my clients were so dysregulated by not knowing what to do or how to get to know this child or whatever. Yes. Once that was more stable, then we could start working on some other pieces. Yeah, that's what 100%. I learned.
Yeah, and it's never just a one person thing. And especially now, I think it's so interesting to see when people are making jokes on TikTok or social media or, talking about how this is going back generations when you're looking at autistic kids, you're looking at autistic families, and the therapists are in the room going, yes, we've been saying this for decades. This is not new. I promise you Tylenol didn't cause this, because we've been working with those family systems forever. And that, whether you're trained in that or not, you're very aware that there's more going on in the family than just with your client.
Yeah. And there was, especially when, I guess, maybe tunnel vision, but when I was in a young social worker, I'm trying to remember how old I was. It was in my 20s, early mid-20s. People really didn't understand the whole Asperger's thing. It was just really not understood. And so that included the families. They were confused. And so sometimes they were in these very adversarial relationships with their own children.
Yes.
And that's what I thought was really toxic and needed some support. And that helped.
So you worked with the family from the beginning. So you were going in and really working with everybody to change all the pieces of the system.
I did.
And working with them individually?
I did. Wow. I worked with people individually, but I would often be like, let's invite mom and dad in.
Yeah.
And then we would sort of do that. And then sometimes the child would I'd be like, why don't we just talk to mom and dad? And that wasn't, by the way, no blame there. That was to support them.
No.
So they could really feel validated for some of their concerns and their worries and their fears, and then help them connect differently with their child and also get them connected with the community. With other families.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful point, too, because even the families that I work with where we have, 2 neurodivergent adults and 3 neurodivergent kids, no 2 people look the same. No 2 people are showing up in the same way. So I think that's part of what causes people to get missed a lot of the time is that, they'll look at somebody else in the family and be like, you're nothing like me. That can't be autism. And it's like, no, it is. Yeah, that's autism, too.
Yeah.
It shows up in many flavors in families, and people are just triggering each other, and one person sounds sensitive, the other's very loud, like those types of things. So families are complicated. So you like a challenge. You like to have multiple clients at a time. Do you think that that level of intensity, have you always been drawn to that, like the harder cases, the harder types of therapy?
Well, I told somebody on a phone call earlier today, I was talking to a colleague, and I said, I think I've been a family therapist since I was about 5 years old.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I bet you have. You're so easy to talk to, too.
Well, because, and I do mean nothing but respect for my family of origin, but there's plenty of there's plenty of material there, and so I think that I grew up in a big Italian family, and also there's a lot of immigration stories. My grandparents, great-grandparents, great aunts and uncles immigrated from Italy. And there was a lot of drama in all of that. And so I'm very comfortable with drama.
Yeah. That helps.
Yeah.
That does really help.
Yeah.
I do often think about that in session. Sometimes one session ends and it goes really late and you're going right into the next session. And I think to myself, no other job, with the exception of, I don't know, maybe healthcare, you work in an ER or something. But sometimes the pivot in this job is so intense.
Yeah.
Like what you go from happening in one session, like people are screaming, I'm getting divorced, I'm out of here, people are leaving the room. You could have something like that happen. And then the next session, no one has anything to talk about. You're just sitting and it's silent, it's quiet. You just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
It could be one person, it could be 5 people. I mean, it is just a wild ride.
Yeah, I do.
You have to be ready.
I appreciate the dynamic. I appreciate the energy between. In my mid-50s, I appreciate the energy between, and I seek healthy energy between, not not stuff that's toxic or dysregulating. But I certainly had a lot of that growing up, a lot of dysregulation, a lot of, not so great dynamics. So I just, that was part of my adaptation as a kid was figuring out what all this meant. And so I've kind of learned how to make that into a career.
Yeah, same. Were you a kid that was really into learning about people and reading books and things like that about these type of topics? Were you super into psychology and all of that?
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was the same way. When I was 15, I was reading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and relationship books and books about grieving. And my mom was like, "What are you doing?" It's it's so interesting. But I think I was trying to figure everything out. I was like, "There's a lot of confusing things happening. I'm just trying to work it out."
Yeah,
no, I still do that.
Seriously, one of my favorite authors was Judy Blume, and I think she deals with relationships really well in her books. So yeah,
and here we are. So tell me a little bit. Now you are very, very big in the relational life therapy world. That's one of your big things that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't think that everybody knows what that is.
Absolutely, yeah. Relational Life Therapy, or otherwise known as RLT, was created and founded by Terry Real. He is the author of the book Us and I Don't Want to Talk About It. And I think, and there's a few other books he's written as well. Terry developed this work. He himself was trained in the Boston, New York area, very systems-oriented work. But what he's known for is really recognizing the impact that we all experience under a system of patriarchy. And he really tackled that. It became a passion of his. And he developed an entire model around what happens if you understand that a relationship system is influenced by another system, the patriarchy, that is, unhealthy and really feeding into unhealthy relationship dynamics. What happens if you confront that, or as he would call it, carefrontation? But if you confront, and if you name it, if you can see it playing out in relationships and bring it to the table, like really name it. And he developed a whole model around that. So it's known for couples therapy, but honestly, we're starting to pivot into, you can use relational life therapy in individual work, in family work, in parent-child work. Yeah, because
I didn't know that.
And we're going to be, sort of in the process of expanding into that because relationships are in all of our lives, even if we're not in relationship therapy. Right. So
it's true.
Yeah. So the model really, like I said, it tackles that idea of like what happens if we really look at that patriarchal system and how it's influencing the couple. And it also works on helping people get in touch with what's underneath, what's informing the behavior that's getting the couple stuck in their dance. And what's in the family of origin, what's in the social cultural context, and I'm adding what's in the neurobiological profile that might be contributing to what's underneath those automatic reactions we have that show up in our most intimate relationships.
Yes. And if you've never watched Terry Real, go pull some clips of Terry Real because he is a force. I mean, he is really something to watch. And I find his books to be absolutely fascinating. But to watch him work, like any of these clips that I'm sure are out there on the internet, but I was lucky enough to get to see him speak at the symposium this year, and just, tears were just streaming down my face. He had so many beautiful points about, kind of where our world is right now and how important therapy is and how important it is to address, the patriarchal things that are coming down, and not just systemically in the big, obvious ways, but in couples and how we treat each other and, how we take care of one another. It was really powerful.
Yeah. And the other thing about RLT that I also think is somewhat unique from other couples models is that once we assess the situation, we learn what those stuck patterns are that get people stuck, and we help them see their role in it. We help them take ownership of that. And we do some trauma work in the presence of the partner, which is also unusual for couples work. But then once we know or we understand that the clients in front of us have more understanding of their reactivity and they can sort of have more agency over it, then we teach them skills. And what we talk about is, the part of you that gets in there and tries to protect yourself against what you think is an attack or something against you. That part of you will not learn skills. So until we can tackle that part and unravel, unpack it, and understand it and take some ownership of that part, we aren't able to learn skills. So then when we're at that point in the therapy, we then roll up our sleeves and say, now let's talk about some real relationship skills that you can use when you're disagreeing, when you're not in alignment, when it's not about everything being perfect and everyone being calm. It's about learning how to navigate well with each other.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of the timing. Like, this is not the timing when those parts are showing up and, you're deep in conflict. No one's getting anywhere. You're just triggering each other and kind of falling into that spiral. That seems to be unique. The RLT method seems to be unique in that you have these defined skills. Are there any that you could throw out there as just an explanation for people that aren't familiar?
Oh, sure. I mean, we have sort of some skills that we name, like we teach couples how to speak up to make things better, listen for understanding, advocate for oneself with love, recognize the value of these skills helping your biosphere. So leaning into the us, not you and me.
Yes.
Us.
Which is a lot harder to do than it sounds. Yeah, absolutely.
Cherishing is a skill. I mean, there's a whole lot of skills. And one of there's a very well-known, it seems like it's well-known, but it may not be well-known to everybody, but a tool that he teaches called the feedback wheel, which is a really nice tool to help couples or anyone in a relationship learn how to talk about things that break down in communication, but how to do it in a way that sort of takes it apart, takes your thoughts and feelings apart in pieces so that you can communicate it much more directly, and your partner has a chance to take it in these pieces and not like all at once, one big thing, one big mountain. So the feedback wheel is a really nice tool. I mean, just in a nutshell, it's, here's what I saw and heard. Here's the story I told myself about what I saw and heard.
Oh, yeah. That's the one. Yep.
Here's the feeling I made myself feel based on the story I told myself. And here's what I want to request now so we can get back into connection right now.
Oh, that's incredible. That piece, the story I told myself piece, I remember hearing Brene Brown do a clip about that. I don't know if it was just a funny clip or she was telling a story, but it was like something about her being in the refrigerator, or her husband being in the refrigerator and being exasperated with her because he couldn't find something to eat. And she's like, I know you're disappointed in me and you think I'm a terrible wife. And the story I'm telling myself is that I've let you down. And he was like, Brene, I do the grocery shopping. Like, I don't know why you thought I was talking to you. Like, I was talking to the refrigerator, essentially, just like, oh, damn, we don't have any turkey. And like that, I give that story to couples all the time because it so often, especially with autistic couples where, we have that rejection sensitivity where our feelings are so close to the surface anyway, because life is just hard and we are sensitive. And then, it really doesn't take much to tell yourself a story that you've totally disappointed your partner. You can't do anything right. So sometimes to break it down specifically like that is really eye-opening of just like, wait, what story did you tell yourself? I didn't say any of that. So do you find that's often the case with that exercise?
Yes, yes. And when we're first teaching that tool, and it is the most favorite tool for the neurodivergent folks, the neurodiverse couples I work with, because it just breaks each piece of the feedback down so it can be taken in, it can be communicated in very specific ways. When we first teach it, we are teaching two roles. We're teaching the speaker role and we're teaching the listener role. So when the speaker is speaking, the listener can't say, that's not that is a story you told yourself. Like they can't, they can't say
you're like, nope, you do not have the talking stick right now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So we teach them to just, your role is just to listen so that you can understand. You don't even have to agree. You don't even have to see it the same way. You just have to listen for like, can I try to understand their perspective? I don't have to agree. And so
hard.
That's the teaching that happens before you even get into the feedback wheel. And then you use the feedback wheel to practice these skills, right? Listening for understanding and speaking up to make things better. And then being able to recognize that these other little skills within that, which is sort of, containment, like you're not going to start in on, well, yeah, that's not at all what I said. That's not at all what I meant. You're just going to listen.
Right. Just going to listen.
And containment on the speaker's end too. You are not going to pull in the whole kitchen sink. You're going to talk about one problem, not 10. Yeah. So all of these skills can be actually practiced even just within this one tool.
Beautiful.
And then when you get deeper, when couples come along and they're using it and they're getting better at it, then we can go back and say, let's take a look at that story you're telling yourself. I wonder if there's a connection in with your own family relational trauma that gets kicked up and kind of feeds that story, but only after there's been some work done where people are ready for
they get comfortable with it. And then we're going to find out who's that voice in your head. Who are you hearing there?
Exactly.
That's so helpful. I find too that the tools are so important. Having a framework, having a script, having any kind of like patterned anything that you can give a couple, they often are so grateful for understanding something in a new way. And sometimes it makes me laugh. Like couples will come back and they'll be like, we use I statements 800 times this week. And I'm like, okay, we don't have to use I statements all the time. But that's more of a when we get into the conflict and we're trying to get somewhere. But oftentimes they take it really seriously. They're really trying. And a lot of my clients are so appreciative of a framework that fits them.
Right.
Because I think with a lot of couples therapy they've had in the past, it's been sort of geared towards neurotypical people and really didn't have those kind of like accommodations where you can make it fit, the way your brain works. So I love when they're geared specifically towards, understanding the way communication happens.
I will also say that when Terry Real and I started talking about neurodiversity back in 2022 or 23, I can't remember now. Somewhere around there, I did something for the Relational Life Foundation that kind of introduced this topic. I started talking to Terry about, because he's very open that he has ADHD. And I said to him one day, I think your model is neurodivergent friendly because it was developed by a neurodivergent mind.
100%. And it's exactly why we're drawn to it. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And he was like, oh my gosh, now, he just didn't think of it that way. But there's truth in that.
There's something, I can feel that in him when I didn't know that he was ADHD, but as he was speaking, I was like, your brain goes places my brain goes.
Yes.
Like, you can tell his thoughts are quick. He connects things. Like it's very much something that I can like feel in people.
Exactly. He can be very spontaneous too. He can be very present in the moment.
The model that you were just talking about, I could see how that would go really well. The different with couples who have a uniqueness in that, one tends to be, let's say, getting into kind of that like trauma responsive over explaining or, just kind of trying to be heard and understanding and understood and bringing all these examples and bringing past history and just trying to get. And oftentimes people like that in a couple, they overwhelm the other partner because they're just, so much at one time. And so that would be such a great way to slow somebody down because you have to go through each point of it. I love that as an idea.
And in relational life therapy, what we would call that behavior is there's what we call losing strategies. In the context of, are we trying to be relational or are we just trying to be right? Are we trying to be?
Oh, I love that.
So in that context of, are we trying to be relational or are we just trying to be right or are we just trying to control? We talk about losing strategies. And one losing strategy of many is unbridled self-expression, which is my personal favorite. Because I can do that.
I'm really good at that. I'm so good at that for days. I could just go and go and go.
Exactly. Yeah. So unbridled self-expression is a losing strategy in the context of trying to be connected if you're just, we're just going on and on and on and on and not making room for your partner. It also can be that there might be some it's hard to contain yourself. So you just keep going. So there's boundarylessness. So we talk about the emotional boundaries of boundarylessness versus walled off. And we tried to help people see where they fall in those areas. Do they tend to lean in towards boundarylessness or walled off when they are most activated?
And then they marry each other. Yes, one of each marries each other. So one is walled off and one is boundaryless, and they're trying to communicate. Wow. I've never heard that put that way before. I don't want my husband to listen to this podcast now, Caron. This is a terrible idea. I'm going to have to confront that later. No, that's really a very neurodivergent trait too. And it's not on purpose.
And here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up because as I try to integrate what my learning over the years of mostly high masking autism as well as some other neurodivergences is that neurobiology. So if you're high masking autistic and maybe one of the traits that shows up is that it's really difficult to take what's going on in your head and get it out in words. Maybe that's a thing that's hard for you. That could look like walled off. And so what we talk about in RLT is, the impact is that it lands on the other as walled off, but what's underneath the hood, what's underneath that walling off may not simply be because you grew up and none of your family members talked about emotions. It might be, but it also might be that you're neurodivergent or you're autistic. And so that's an extra challenge and it's feeding into that what looks like a reaction. And so 100%. I call it the intersection of relational trauma and autism or relational trauma and neurodivergence. It's like I don't try when I teach the students that I teach at the Institute, I tell them, don't try to figure out what's what. Just recognize there's an intersection.
Yeah, sometimes recognize it. Yes, just see it. 100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes the difference is really important in intention too. If someone is really struggling to connect with an emotion or to explain themselves or they're really frozen, couples will come in and the partner will say, they're stonewalling me or they're icing me out. And I'm like, do we know that though? Like we don't necessarily know that. They may not be able to give you what you need or they may be in a frozen nervous system state. So I think that goes back to what you talked about before with the timing, is that sometimes the timing of these conversations can be advantageous for one and not the other. And that's really tricky.
Well, and you're talking about the story we tell ourselves. So the story we tell ourselves is you're stonewalling. And there might be grains of truth to that, okay? But
sure,
we want to try to learn about, like I said, eventually we want to come back to that story. Where is that story coming from? Is it just from your partner, or are there other historical pieces that we want to look at that might be informing that story as well?
Absolutely. Isn't it so fun? This really does feel like a puzzle now that we're talking about it like this. I love unpacking these things and understanding what they belong to, too, because often people are so shocked that there are, things that come from childhood. They're like, no, this isn't about my childhood. I'm like, well, maybe not. We don't know what's in there. And that's a piece of every relationship, I'm sure. I don't think you can get through childhood and have a relationship without something coming through.
Right. Well, you're learning in childhood. That's your first social system. So you're learning about relationships through that system one way or another. And I always tell people, too, my clients, when we look at our family of origins or a family that we came from, we don't have to get into blaming anybody. I'm sure 99% of the time, parents are doing the best they can with what they have. What we're looking at is, given the system you grew up in and you internalized, what was the impact that is now playing out in your relationship that is not desirable to you or your partner right now?
Yes.
Rather than blaming and shaming, we try not to do that.
Yeah, it's just for understanding.
Exactly.
So I know one of the topics you and I have talked about before offline is the idea of validation in a relationship, and how, that can be something that's really, really hard, especially I think for autistic people. I think this is a fair thing to say. Like, sometimes validation feels like a lot of my clients will be like, you're asking me to tell them a lie, or like, you're asking me to tell them they're right about everything. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. So tell me how that comes up in your couples work.
Well, I'll tell you, Corey, that is a challenge. I have a couple right now. I really enjoy working with this couple, and it's a heterosexual, kind of cis heterosexual couple, monogamous. And the male partner is diagnosed with autism, and he's he's very embracing of it, and it's like a positive part of his identity, and he appreciates that understanding of himself. And his wife is what we would probably categorize as neurotypical. And when I just had a session with just him the other day, and trying to talk with him about, actually, what I often do with couples is I'll talk about, what is your neurodiversity profile? And I can do that with both couples. It doesn't matter if you're neurodivergent or not. Like, how do you process information? How do you communicate? What are ways that you see context or don't see context? All of that. And this particular guy, when we were talking about trying to understand his wife's framework of how she arrives at conclusions or at ideas, it's very hard if it's not logical, if it doesn't seem logical to him. And, and she's very emotionally informed, and so he was, I felt like, okay, he's really getting this. And then was inviting him to, it was like a role play or something, inviting him to be able to sort of, allow one of her perceptions about something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And he said, but then I'm not being authentic. Like, I'm lying to her.
Yes.
I can't lie to her.
Yes.
And I was like, oh boy. And yes, and that happens a lot. It wasn't a new experience for me, but I thought, oh, we're getting.
Sure.
And so my approach to that is, I'm this is the affirming part. It's like, I really respect the fact that that's the way your brain works, and that's the way you see and perceive, and just literally how you perceive the world around you, right?
Yes.
I totally respect that. And as long as you want to be in a relationship with this person who's she's not autistic, and she doesn't have the same framework, the same perception that you do, the same lenses, as long as you choose to be with this person, this is going to be a challenge for you, because she's also, she can give and bend as well, but she has her limits too. And so it depends. Do you want to be, dug into, that's a lie, or can we find a pathway for you to be able to be a little bit more flexible on that? And I always say, we may not be able to, by the way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just you have to understand there might be consequences to that. So I'm very, I never try to convince people. I just lay it out and say, as long as you want to be in a relationship with this person, these are the gives and takes. This is where you're probably going to have to grieve the loss of always feeling like you're telling the truth. And I don't know if you can do that, and maybe you can't, And we just kind of negotiate and talk about it.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll help people with specific wording too. I'll be like, I wonder if you said it differently. That makes sense for you. Or knowing you the way I do, I know you believe that, or you feel that, but sometimes even that is too much.
Yes. And we've talked about that, Corey. You and I talked about that. Knowing who you are, I can sort of take that in. That doesn't work for this particular client. It has been effective for other clients, but
sometimes,
it's not always.
I had a client this a while ago, but there was it was a very kind of just matter of fact discussion, and they were talking about something related to, I don't know, they were somewhere in public, I don't say like a picnic or something like that,
right?
And she had asked him to, and in this case they were both neurodivergent, but she had asked him to move something like a chair or a table or something, and he was like, no, that doesn't make any sense, and she was like, well, I just could you just move it anyway? I know it doesn't make sense in the system that you're thinking about, but I would like the tables, closer together. And he was like, well, they should all be in the sun. And she was like, well, no, I just want them closer together. And so they went back and forth. And as we were talking through, I said, I wonder what it's like, for something to not make sense for you, to just do something that doesn't make sense. And he's like, not going to do it. It's like, okay. Well, and I was like, well, I'm sure you do things all the time that don't make any sense. He was like, no, Corey, I don't, to be honest with you. I absolutely don't.
Yes.
And I have a job that's very logical.
Yep.
My family is very logical. And he was like, and I said, okay, so I do understand that. And I do respect that. I mean, we need people like that, right? That's great in certain jobs. But I said, I wonder, for the sake of your relationship, is there a part of you that if your partner is asking for something, we don't have to find the logic, because is there another way to look at that? And he was like, no, I'm unwilling to do that. I'm just unwilling, just hard stop, no.
That's right. And that's what when I kind of sit back and go, well, I mean, it's okay. It's just that there are constant, your relationship might not make it because your partner has needs as well. You have a need for something to, not just a need, but also a wiring that says things have to be logical, things have to be routine, they have to be predictable, they have to be in place. And what my experience is, Corey, I don't know about you, but I never decide that just because somebody is autistic and might have a very logical or sometimes a rigid thinking brain, that there can't be any shifts. I don't make that assumption.
No, of course. No, not at all.
Right? I just sort of test things and I allow them to test it. And there are couples in which people make lots of shifts. And then there are other couples where they don't. So
big time. I think sometimes it's fine. It's what's the why of it? If you say, there are going to be times where you have to put logic down because, your partner's emotion is so important at that point that she's going to feel like you're rejecting her. If you really can go through the start to finish, what's that doing?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt her. I'm like, right, exactly. No, it's not. It doesn't seem obvious that you're hurting her. It seems like you're just being smart. You're doing the smart thing.
Yeah.
So it's the cause and effect.
Well, that's a wonderful point, is that context matters. So I have found that and this one client I was talking about too, when I point out the bigger picture, the context, the kids and hurting his wife or not hurting his wife, then that does move him. He's like, oh, when you put it that way. So being able to name the context, the challenge is for that to stay at the front of mind in situations where it's needed. It's not always easy. So sometimes scaffolding is needed, right? Coaching or, reminders or prompts or posters that are on the wall reminding of certain things that are important to remember.
It's hard. And I think too, I notice a difference between the genders and how they respond to that. I think sometimes it's a little easier for women, I would say non-male genders, to connect with other people's emotions when they're feeling something unpleasant. Yeah. So because I think probably that's wiring, right? Like, we have to take care of babies whether we're dysregulated or not. I think there's something there where, or at least that's what my therapist likes to tell me. She's like, when you are hunting, you can't think of people's feelings. I'm like, that's true. That's a good point. That makes sense to me. I'm like, that's right. We need to just stay alive when we're hunting. There are probably things there.
Right.
But, sometimes it is hard because I also have to say to partners, when your partner is in that, kind of more fixed mindset and they can't get out of it, and it seems like they're not thinking about your feelings, it might be that they just can't right now. It doesn't mean they don't care about your feelings. It means that right now they are stuck because they're feeling something so unpleasant.
That's right.
And when that subsides, they're more connected to, oh, shoot, there's another person here and they are also feeling, and oh, I didn't mean to hurt you.
Yeah.
So it's not a lack of caring.
Yep.
It's just a lack of being able to attend to that care in the moment.
Yep.
At least that's how I see it. I don't know.
Yeah. And I will say, just kind of as you're talking, what's coming up for me is in relational life therapy, when we do a part of the work, we call it relational mindfulness work. And this is when we do some relational trauma work where we invite some experiential exercise working with the inner child, working with the younger part within us that gets reactive. When we do that work in the presence of the partner, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, the high masking autistic or neurodivergent partner, but particularly the autistic one, will see or experience their partner, getting in touch with these tender parts, these wounded parts. And the autistic client will be like, you go to the client and you say, so what came up for you as you were witnessing your partner's work? And 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, I had no idea. Or I don't ever want my partner to feel hurt from me because I reminded them of their, father who was, insensitive and not relational or not helpful. I don't want to be that person. So it really does move them. And it goes the other way too. I've seen I once had a couple where the non-autistic partner who had a lot of deep trauma from her past life.
Yeah.
Her partner, her autistic partner, did this work, this inner child work, and he cried and he tapped into his emotions. And his partner said, I've never seen you cry. And that means so much to me to see this part of you. I don't get to see that part very often, and that's what's so hard for me. So that work can be incredibly powerful if done well.
Beautiful. And there's not always room for that in a lot of therapy. Like, I think so many different therapies can miss that opportunity for bringing that inner child work into the room. Like, there's something going on that goes way back.
Right.
And when you look at the generational trauma of being autistic and undiagnosed, like, there's probably many, many, many of us that grew up with parents that didn't have, the emotional maturity that other parents had. They didn't know how to comfort. They didn't know, some of the things that we know now. And even just one generation, I can feel that shift in my office. It's so crystal clear.
It is. And it's important. And it helps contextualize too. Like, back then there wasn't much knowledge about any of this. So it would have been hard for your parents to have known. And at the same time, the impact was that you weren't seen or understood. And that really had an impact on you. And now when you're in your primary relationship with your wife or your partner, and they don't seem to see or understand you, it just gets heightened, right? It just, it gets amplified. So we have to figure that out.
It absolutely. So much yes. So much yes. So let me ask you this. What is a hot take that you have as a therapist that may be unique to your specific work? Do you have anything that you feel like stands out?
Oh, well, I mean, I think one of the things that I do love to talk about with my neurodiverse couples is this idea that we can be differently wired. We can have high masking autism, ADHD, or other forms of neurodivergence and be married to somebody who is non-autistic, non-ADHD, or have other differently wired in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that we behave in our relationships, even if we know why, even if we know where that behavior comes from, it still has an impact. And so I talk a lot about learning how to be accountable to that impact, even if it's not something intentional. Right? Even if you're not trying to hurt your partner, but learning how to understand, but this is the impact. And so how do I, in my partnership, have some love for myself, so loving accountability, but take some accountability. And then what scaffolding or support do I need so I can do that well without resentment, without retaliation, without bitterness? And for both partners, by the way, not just for the neurodivergent one. But I think that's a hot take, because I think I talk a lot about this sort of accountability isn't out the window when you're working with somebody who has something that might be disabling to them.
Sure.
There needs to be support and understanding from the partner, but they can also understand that if a good example of this is, if my executive functioning is not great, if that's a challenge for me, and it's like my partner's number one skill, and the impact on my partner is taking on a lot. They're taking on a heavy load of executive functions. I don't have to feel shame and blame about it. That's not appropriate. But I can understand there's an impact. And maybe one way I can be accountable is by hiring a coach, or by, at least being open about it and talking like, yes, that is something I'm not good at. And so I'm going to let me take on these other things that I am good at, so you can take on, that's what I mean by accountability. I don't mean, blame and shame.
And does that also fit in when you're talking about things like gratitude and, being kind of more like speaking to the things that they're doing? Is that part of it too?
Yeah. Say more about that. I'm not sure if I'm understanding.
The example that you gave is such a good one, because there's so many couples where, one might have sharper executive functioning, or it comes more naturally. So maybe they're doing more of the cooking and more of the cleaning and kind of like taking on the household things.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they will assume the other partner doesn't appreciate it. And they're actually so deep in shame about it that they hate bringing it up because it feels terrible. So even just saying thanks for doing that can make them feel really awful that they're not doing it. So I wonder if part of the accountability piece would be, just speaking to what they're doing, or letting them know that you appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Being able to express that gratitude to each other. And I think part of it is that. Part of it is recognizing how negotiation can be valuable, right? We can negotiate what each of us bring to this relationship, both logistically as well as emotionally, as well as intellectually, as well as spiritually. We can sort of discuss that and kind of negotiate how we're going to divide and conquer. And also that not everything has to be 50-50. That's silly for any relationship,
Yeah, it feels unrealistic.
It's not. It might be 80-20 in the executive functioning area, but it might be 80-20, in some cases, one person is providing more financial stability or other types of stability. A lot of times I actually point out, this is another hot tip, I point out what I call neurodiverse relationship stances. So social butterfly meets socially awkward.
Oh, how many of those do I have? Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what does that bring, though? So for the social butterfly, not all the time, but a lot of the times, the social butterfly has kind of an emotional intensity about that partner does. And so they benefit from the emotional stability of the socially awkward partner. There's often a stability they bring. And I often will point that out after I have a relationship with the couple, and they'll be like, oh, that's a good point. So trying to, like you said, trying to appreciate what is there that they are bringing, not just what isn't there. So
that's a great example. Do you have other pairings? I would love to know more.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Sometimes things just fly right out of my head, but one is emotional intensity meets emotional intensity, but there's a different flavor of each one, which I'm not going to be able to pull right now. But one is a little bit more walled off emotional intensity, and the other is a little more boundaryless emotional intensity. So I've seen that, particularly in LGBTQ couples. I've seen that.
Yeah.
And there's two others, and if I think of them, I'll let you know. They're just not.
All right, perfect. I'm good. Leave us wanting more, Caron. That's fine. We love that too. So in your work, this is definitely, I know you said you like a challenge, and you're really good with multiple clients and things like that, families and couples, but this is hard work.
It is.
And this is definitely a tough time right now to be working with neurodivergent people for a lot of reasons. I know in this area, we have a ton of people who are neurodivergent, and working for the government and, kind of in a lot of tough spaces with their careers and things like that. Accommodations have been just yanked out from under so many people on, I'm sure, both of our caseloads and things like that. What's hard for you about this job? Are there ever things about it that, are really a struggle?
Yeah. One thing that it's hard, and I'm also kind of learning to detach a little bit from the outcome, which is, sometimes, and I've been reading a lot about this too, when you've got different, like really different neurotypes who are married to one another, sometimes there's not a bridge you can create, So it's hard when I can, there are times when it's very clear to me and I see it. Where I go with myself is my role is either to help them build that bridge or help them end the misery. And when I think of it that way, I do feel better about it. It doesn't feel as hard because I don't see myself as being some kind of, magician who's supposed to make everyone love each other. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's helping people uncouple and do it well. But that's hard. It's also hard sometimes when I do find with some neurodiverse couples, like the couple I described where the guy, really can dig into like, I have to be authentic or just sort of very logical in his thinking. Sometimes that depletes me as a kind of more neurotypical leaning person. I can get depleted. And so again, I just kind of sit back and recognize where I have agency and where I don't, and try not to get too attached to their outcome because that's their life and not mine.
It is really hard. I always wonder if clients know that you feel so invested, because I've had those moments with doctors. You have a doctor that gets emotional. Like I remember when I was doing fertility, like a doctor got really emotional one time and I was like, oh, you actually care if we have a baby. This is so great. Like it was really a touching moment of just like, I just assumed that you would have to be sort of detached to do that work. And I think, a lot of us got into therapy, for a lot of reasons, but that strong urge to help is really intense for the people that I really admire.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of therapists in this area, you being one, that is fantastic in that way. And I wonder sometimes if clients realize, how much we're rooting for them and, how kind of like invested in outcomes that, most therapists are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good question. I mean, I've learned, I really do believe this, and I mean this in a very constructive way, but I'm there to help people who are saying they want that help. And at the end of the day, I go home to my family and their family is not my family. And I'm really clear on that,
Yep. Yeah. And you have to have a separation. I remember a supervisor said that to me once. They were like, you can't go home and just stay up all night, worrying. And I was like, have you met me? But that's something that I think you have to work on actively. That doesn't come without work or you'll drive yourself crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But it is like, it's a thing though. It really is like realizing sometimes too that, like I liked what you said about, working and supporting the relationship. And sometimes, walking away, you might feel like, oh, the session bombed or this was such a terrible session with them or they're in such a bad place. But sometimes the couple needs to end, sometimes that is the thing that needs to happen. And so it's not always like, I never think it's my job to determine the outcome, but, just feeling deeply for the people you're working with and, wanting them to live their best life.
That's right. And I do want to be clear. I never tell a couple you should end your misery.
No. There are people that do, though. Gosh, have I heard that so many times
I don't
from
do
clients.
that. I don't do that.
Oh, I don't either.
I'm very clear that if a couple were to say, what do you think? I might say, well, this is what I see. And when I see this kind of thing, what it often leads to is this. But this is your decision. And people make all kinds of decisions under duress and miserable situations.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to tell you. I really don't tell people what to do. Yeah.
And I'm like, you do not want my opinion. You did not come here for my opinion. I promise you. No, No, and I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Like if clients think we're sitting here, with some like judgmental stance on what they should be doing, they'd never come back.
Right.
So
exactly.
I think that's the beauty of our role is that like, it's not my job. I don't know what you think and feel. I don't have your past, your experiences. Like I could never tell you what to do with all the things that are in your brain and body. So I'm just here to help point some things out. But
exactly. I totally agree with you, Corey.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So you have some very big stuff coming up. I would love for people to know about your big training and your webinar. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have going on?
Yeah, thank you, Corey. So I have been training with Terry Real and in the Relational Life Institute since 2018, and I'm now a trainer where I teach students who are getting certified for the Institute. And in that role of trainer, as I said, I introduced the concept of neurodiversity as something we should be mindful and aware of a few years back. And more recently, they asked me, the Institute, Terry asked me if I would do a course. Terry said, I really want you to do a course on this. Our community needs to learn about how to integrate RLT with neurodivergent brains. And so it's happening. I can't believe it. It's finally here. It's happening. So the webinar is free. You're going to post a link somewhere in your materials.
Yes. The show notes will have the link for all the information.
Yep. And that's free. And that's a taste of the bigger course. And then there's a course that's 5 weeks. It's 5 sessions, each an hour and a half, with 3 Q&A sessions in between. So there's it's like 8 sessions altogether. And each session of the 5 has kind of a theme. One's more about the kind of neurobiology as context. One is I'm inviting the authors of Is This Autism on, and we're going to have a conversation with them, which I'm really excited about. Yeah.
I'm excited about that too. Fantastic.
Yep. Dr. Henderson, Dr. Whalen, and Dr. White. And then we're going to do, because RLT is divided into 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So the last 3 classes will be devoted to each of those phases. And one of those classes, there will be a demonstration that we recorded, not of a real couple, of a role play couple, doing the relational mindfulness, relational trauma work with a neurodiverse couple.
Wow.
So that'll be cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's a lot of content too for one course. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a fire hose. Everybody get ready.
Yeah. And I do have to say this because if you're listening to this and you're not a therapist, which is probably a lot of people who are listening, it is very hard as a therapist to get training as a couples counselor in any way related to neurodivergence. It's hard to get neurodivergence training, period.
Yep.
So, and that I so respect what you're doing because I often have that exact same feeling where, I'll walk into a modality and go, this is good, but that won't work, this is really interesting, but we can't do it that way. And sometimes some of these modalities, like they will tell you this can't be amended, it has to be done, authentically the way it was taught. And I think that's a real letdown because we do need accommodations. We do need to change things. So when you were telling me about this work, I was so excited because we're just desperate for new, techniques to use with these couples. There's just not much out there. So
I agree.
You're doing very important work. Yeah. Have you had that experience of like looking for other trainings and all of that?
I've trained myself. I've talked to other, it's really been difficult. Yeah. So, and I give a lot of credit to Terry and the Institute for being open and saying, we can, and my whole thing is you can stay in the model, but there are adaptations we have to make, and I think that's true for a lot of models, but you're right. Not every model is open to that.
So it's nice when you can actually get trained by the model to make these accommodations. So your partnership with Terry is incredible.
Yeah.
And I do, like you said, there's something about, his energy and his model and all the things that like has some neurodivergent flavor to it. And I think it just works beautifully in this content. I can't wait. I'm like going to be glued to the screen. So is there anything else you want people to know about your website? How can they reach you?
Yeah, definitely. I also have a practice that I am very
You sure do. A massive, very successful practice.
Thank you. So it's Starobin Counseling, and you can go to starobincounseling.com. And I do like to point out that even though there are a couple of us that do a lot of couples work, there are others of us who do actually all the work I used to do, but now they're doing it. So there's parent-child work, there's work with teens and young adults, both neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent, non-autistic, but we do have a specialization in neurodiversity-minded, neurodiversity-affirming work. We have trauma specialists. We do all of it. So and we're based in Olney, Maryland, and you can go to starobincounseling.com. We have a couple of really great groups, a parent support group and a sibling support group that I think is really amazing. So check it out.
And you also have a newsletter too, don't you?
Yeah, we just posted that. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And if people sign up for the webinar, will that keep them in the loop of all the things that you have coming down?
Yes, that's a good point. If you are not sure if you want to watch the webinar or not, just register because it'll get you into the kind of the email queue so you can get more information about the course that's coming right after the webinar and other information about Relational Life Institute. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And my newsletter for Starobin Counseling, if you go and click on subscribe, you can also do that too.
Okay, that's on the website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like, I know I'm getting that. I don't remember when that started or where, but I definitely am getting it. It's awesome.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, definitely check out Caron's website and her practice. I think this training is going to be incredible. I got a little taste of it and I can't wait. So thank you so much for your time and for being here. You are just a hero in the world of neurodiverse couples therapy, and I'm so excited for people to hear what you had to say.
Thank you so much, Corey, for the conversation. It was fantastic.
Thanks so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you'd like to hear more about high masking, late diagnosed autism, find us on Instagram at NeuroCorius. And if you're ready to unmask in real life with real people, check out our unmasking retreats at CoreyAndreas.com. If you're a therapist or provider who's looking to do better with your neurodivergent clients, we have online courses designed to help you get there. Check us out at CoreyAndreas.com. You can also find more content on YouTube at That's Me Pod. And if you haven't already, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We're so glad you're here. See you next time. Quick thank you to the sponsors who make the unmasking retreats possible. They're not just logos on a page. They genuinely believe in this community. Head over to CoreyAndreas.com to learn about the retreat, meet our partners, and find out how to get involved.